Hey everyone, my name is Rose and welcome to my channel. So I create weekly sewing content and this week it is all about the baby. So this is perfect for if you yourself are pregnant or you also have maybe someone in your life who's pregnant, and I have a couple of free patterns that I'm going to share in the link below, so keep a lookout. So the first up, I have a little project for sleeping. It's a Moses bassinet. So it's wicker and it has a little openings for the baby to kind of put their arms out, which is pretty dangerous in my opinion. So I'm going to create a little liner and take you along the process of draping something that is a little bit out of my comfort zone. Then next, I'm going to do a little nest for the baby. This is also something for sleep. So I use the pattern from the shop I work at, but I'm gonna leave a couple links below where they share dimensions and you can follow along my sewing process to create your own. And then the last two projects I work on, I have made the patterns myself and I share them in the documents below so you can easily access them on Google and print them out yourself and follow along the video to create your own. So I have a little banner using fabric scraps. So I had created my wedding dress a few months back and I used some of the fabric there and some of the fabric from the two other projects in this video. So everything kind of comes together and it looks really nice, I think. And the last project is something that you can use as a little like hanging up thing in your nursery or your friend's nursery. And you could also use it for tummy time. And it's also a scrap busting project. So let's get sewing. First things first, we're tackling this Moses basket and I am just kind of draping it along. I start at the center back where the baby's head is going to be, and I use push pins. So at first I started with it standing upright, and then I realized it's so much easier if you lay it down like this. So I really thought this was so much easier. And I'm just putting like clear push pins in the spaces. Next, I'm gonna go along and like mark everything with either you can use a fabric pencil or an actual pencil, which is what I ended up using. So I usually just drape on a dress form. So this project is so much different than anything that I've been working on. So I just wanted to make sure that I go in and double check, triple check everything. I also am only working with like a small amount of fabric, so I need to be as precise as possible. I go in and mark everything with the pencil. I add 1-inch seam allowance to triple check, and then once everything looks good, I decide to cut the other side and the base of this little liner. After this is complete, I sew everything together with a French seam and I keep that 1-inch seam allowance along the top so I can kind of drape it around. I'm just kind of weighing this, but I make sure to place it back on the bassinet after every step just to double check everything I'm doing. After I think all of this is good, I decide to step into the strap making process, and I also make a cute little pillow that will only be used for show. So I make this out of the remaining scrap fabric I do have, and the side seams will be made in French, and then I add a little liner as well to this little pillow. So I can always take it out and clean it if there's any little messes that happen on this guy. After doing the French seams, I create a small little pillow insert using a lighter weight fabric, and then I just stuff it, close the seam, and it's ready to be inserted into the pillowcase. Now the fun part, I'm starting to assemble all of my hard work and it's starting to look really good. At this point in the process, I only have the ties tacked into place and holding everything up. I just want to make sure that everything is fitting properly, and when everything looks good, I sew it in and we're done, ready to start the next project. So next up is our nest, and this is my little inspiration image. I am working with also some nice trim that's going to go alongside the edges. So I just share some inspiration images with you. And the first thing is I'm tracing the pattern onto both my top and back, and then adding basting stitches along where I'm pointing. This is going to help when everything needs to get flipped and tied, tucked underneath and hand sewn. I'm adding the little lace trim. So all my fabric is actually secondhand and thrifted. And this was actually, the first one is actually a tablecloth with that beautiful lace trim, and I wanted to incorporate everything together. So I add the lace trim with a basting stitch first, and then I sew the top and bottom of the nest together with the right sides together. So after the right sides are sewn together, I'm just going in and clipping all the curved edges so that when we flip it inside out, everything lays nice and flat. After that, the garment or the nest gets flipped inside out, and I make sure just to give this a really good press. Then the next step is going to be to we're adding like a little tunnel so our tie can go and snake throughout the whole thing and pull together. So the next step is to add this tunnel, and I suggest making this about 3/4 of an inch because I made mine a little on the small side and it was a little hard for me to put the taping throughout the whole thing. So learn from my mistakes. Next up, I am just we trace the centerpiece. This is gonna have like the flat batting. I think this is like also for quilting. And I'm just sewing along that the line that I created. This is gonna be where your insert is. So you have the flat batting on the inside, and then like the puffed batting is gonna be stuffed around that external portion of our little nest. So next up, I'm deciding to add the trim through that little tunnel that we created. The trim was a little bit on the thicker side. I kind of wish I chose something a little bit thinner because it was a little bit challenging just to thread it throughout with the safety pin. But I managed to get it through, and then we move on to adding our flat batting in. So next up is to add the batting into the center. So I had a little challenge with this. I think the best bet is to cut it about 1 or 2 centimeters smaller on the width and the height so that it can lay flat and the edges still can curl up, like the side batting pieces can come up. So I ended up having to remove it and cut it and add it back, and then that process a few times before it was absolutely perfect. Then I decided to add all of the fluff throughout. I pushed it all the way towards the back and then worked my way towards the front. And the last step was just to sew all of the openings. So I did that by hand, and then you can just attach, like tighten the trim, and it kind of closes on itself. It came out really cute. And this is the final take. I really like how this came out, and I think the baby's gonna like this as well. Just a nice little nest. So the next step, I'm making this little half moon wall hanging with a pocket. So this can also double as something great for tummy time. So if you want, you can also just omit the pocket and just use it for tummy time or a little pillow in the bassinet. So I'm using leftover tablecloth fabric from my nest, and I also had some leftover lace. So that was perfect. I added that to the top of the pocket and basted that in place. And then after this is complete, I added to the right side of the half moon and sewed that in place. This one was really quick. It came together super fast. After that, I'm going to put the right sides together. So the back of this is a little bit different fabric than the front. So with the right sides together, I'm going to sew everything in place and leave a tiny opening or about 3 inches at the top so I can add and stuff this little half moon. So what I ended up doing is using a lot of my scraps. For this project, I cut everything and inserted it into this half moon. This is really great for, leftover scraps, but it also is probably really nice for tummy time. It's going to add some nice extra stability to help prop the baby up. I sewed the last bit by hand to close everything, and then this is the final product, so I hope you like this. If you do, you can see this as a free pattern below. Let me know if you make it, and you can tag me on Instagram at MadeByRo. Next up, we're heading into flag territory. So I'm using all of the leftover scraps from the previous projects for this one. I also made a template. This can be found below as well. And if you make it, please let me know if you like it. So we just need 2 pieces of fabric per flag, and I'm just lining everything up here. I'm sewing everything in an assembly line because this makes everything so much faster. The next step is I'm trimming everything, separating everything apart, and then clipping into all those points so that when we flip it, everything is flipped really neatly with sharp points. So I love the idea of eventually adding the baby's name to the flags. Right now, we don't know the gender, so it's going to be a secret for a bit. I just have like 3 more weeks to go, and then hopefully I can add their name to the banner when I have the time. I also really love the idea of making like something for happy birthdays, something we can use both for me and my husband's birthday, but also our little one, and just using it to create beautiful memories for a few years. It's more sustainable also. After the seam allowance is trimmed, I'm just laying out the order in which I want the flags to lay in, and you can use bias taping, but I had some leftover trim from the nest project, and I just ended up sewing them together at the top edge. Then I pinned my flags in place in the colors that I want the direction to go in. And then the last step is just to sew the bottom together. So this will secure the flags in place. And this is the final take on them. I really loved how this one came out. Just to remind you, this flag and the moon are available in the below link. I hope you enjoy this one. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content, and I look forward to seeing you in other videos. Thanks. Bye.